Okay, so good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Once a Day conference. James, I'm going to hand over to you today to get the proceedings started, and then I'll take over from you again then.
Thanks a million, Stuart. Firstly, I just want to say hello, Happy New Year, and welcome everybody, I suppose, to this morning's annual Teagasc Once a Day conference. Obviously, we would have loved to have been in person in the Horse and Jockey Hotel, but we made the decision prior to Christmas to have it virtually this year, which was probably a good decision, I suppose, with the way the case numbers are now. So for the next hour to hour and a half, we have 3 excellent speakers joining us this morning. So I'm just going to run through the proceedings this morning before I hand back to Stuart. So firstly, we have Dr. Emer Kennedy, who is a researcher in Teagasc Moor Park. Emer's going to discuss the role the tactical use of once a day has on Irish dairy farms. Following that, then we have Don Crowley, Teagasc milk quality specialist, and we've tasked Don with an easy topic this morning. Don's going to discuss management practices in achieving 100,000 of a cell count in once a day herds. And finally, we're joined by County Galway dairy farmer Eamon Connaughton. I'd like to thank Eamon for joining us this morning. Eamon's joining from just outside Craughwell in Galway, and he's going to discuss his switch to once a day milking, and also in terms of achieving a high margin in doing so. So as always, there's an opportunity to ask questions throughout this morning's broadcast. So please do, at the bottom of your screen, send in your questions in the chat box, and we'll endeavour to answer them throughout. And I suppose finally, I want to say a warm thanks to Stuart Childs, who's been called in at short notice. I'm like a lot of other people in the country at the moment. I'm self-isolating in the drumlins of County Cavan. So I just don't fully trust the internet that it'll stay with you for an hour and a half. So I want to thank Stuart for stepping in this morning and facilitating this morning's session. So without further ado, Stuart, I'll hand over to yourself.
Okay, so James, thanks for that, and no problem at all. Happy to sit in. My usual slot anyways, at 10 o'clock on a Thursday morning, so it's no inconvenience to me. So Emer, I might just ask you to start sharing your slides there just before you start. I suppose it's while the once a day is perceived as maybe the full system, Emer, you're going to look at some of the tactical use of it as well. And we've heard of a lot of people, I suppose, maybe that have been using once a day maybe for a couple of weeks in the start of the spring, but you also have some information in relation to late lactation use of it as well. And it's interesting because Dan and I would have actually met a couple of groups there before Christmas as well, and it was something that was common enough in that people were beginning to get a little bit fatigued, I suppose, from the rigors of the season as such, and were interested in going, and some of them actually did go once a day for a period towards the end, and just to see what impact that has. So I will encourage people to put questions in there. James is going to manage the questions as they're coming in. And we like to get questions as we're going along, because sometimes it might be relevant just to deal with it on the slide when we're on it, rather than trying to go back afterwards. So I'll hand over to Emer. So thanks, Emer.
Thanks, Stuart. Okay, good morning, everybody. So as Stuart said, we're going to discuss the results from some of the experiments that we've completed here in Moor Park over the last number of years. Before I start, I'd like to thank the project team who are working hard on this. So we've John Paul Murphy, Kieran McCarthy, Katie Shukru, Peter Doyle, and Michael O'Donovan. So I guess if we talk about once a day, be it short term or long term, there are considerations as to why you might change your system or might incorporate it into the system. Generally, some of the reasons include difficulty sourcing labour. Sometimes people want a better work-life balance, be it on a short-term or a long-term basis, so by doing once a day for the year, or maybe incorporating it into, for example, into lactation, or also to overcome issues with workload. So, for example, the coming spring, if it's really busy, can help alleviate, being stressed out and overworked. Of course, with anything that we incorporate into a system, there are benefits and potential drawbacks. So some of the benefits of once a day include improved energy balance, and that's due to lower body weight and condition score loss. And this can then help lead to improved fertility performance. The potential drawbacks then of once a day, that does include a reduction in milk yield and milk solids production, and also an increased somatic cell count, and these may then result in decreased farm revenue. Okay, so as I said, we're going to look at the experiment. So just to give you an idea of what we're going to go through. So for the past 3 years, we've had a full-time once a day herd. We've looked at early lactation once a day. So that's as soon as the cows calf, putting them on once a day. And then once they've been milked once a day for a number of weeks, they return back to twice a day for the rest of lactation. Late lactation once a day, so that was milking the cows twice a day from the start of lactation until, say, for example, 11 weeks from the end of lactation, and then putting them on once a day. And then in the past year, we've incorporated both early and late lactation once a day. So milking the cows once a day for a few weeks at the start of lactation, back to twice a day, and then about 9 weeks from the end of lactation, putting them back on once a day. Now, one of the most common questions we're asked is, what type of cow do we use? Have we specifically selected the cows for once a day? And the simple answer is no. The cows that we use here, they weren't specifically selected. We just took what we were given. However, they are high EBI cows. So in 2019, the average EBI of our herd was 164, and you can see last year it was 214, and it is pretty heavily weighted towards fertility. In terms of the proportion of heifers in the herds, it ranges from 23 to 27%. And if we just briefly look at the grassland and herd management before we get into some of the results. I said I'd go through the milking routine here. Now, this is the normal milking routine for any cow in the Moore Park herd. It wasn't specifically implemented for once a day milking. It's just how we treat the cows. So when the cows come into the parlor, their teats are stripped, they're pre-dipped, dry wiped, the clusters are on, and then after milking, they're post-dipped again, and we use deosin. When we're once a day milking, those cows are generally milked at 7 o'clock in the morning, and if they're receiving concentrate, they get it all in one feed. For us, over the past few years, what we have found is that one of the critical factors to the success of once a day milking is having really good grassland management. So making sure that there's really high quality grass available to the cows all the time. So having a pre-grazing yield of 1,400 to 1,600 kilos of dry matter per hectare, and then grazing that out to 4 to 4.2 centimetres. During the first grazing rotation, we're giving the grass on a 12-hour basis, so they're getting fresh breaks twice a day. And then from the second rotation onwards, that moves to 24-hour breaks. In terms of the breeding season, we breed the cows for an 11-week breeding season. Okay, we are dealing with mainly short-term once a day here, but given that it's the once a day conference, I said I would just give you a quick update on the results of the full-time once a day treatments. So as I said, we've been looking at full-time once a day for the past 3 years, so 2019, 2020, and 2021. This is just the average of the milk yields across the 3 years. And what immediately jumps out at you is that, yes, there is a big reduction in the milk production and milk solids yield with once a day milking compared to twice a day. So in terms of the milk yield, we're dropping milk production by about 28%, and milk solids yield is dropping by about 21%. Now, data from New Zealand suggests that there's an 11% reduction the first year of once a day, but by year 3, the cows have regained the production levels that they were before they went on once a day. However, in our studies, we have found that the difference between the once a days and the twice a days is similar between the first 3 years, and we aren't seeing any evidence of any recovery in these cows. Now, if we look at the production levels of the cows that are in our herds, they are quite high, and that probably does contribute to the difference. I also just wanted to break it down into the 3 separate years so you could see for yourself what's happening. So if we look at milk yield first, I'll just turn on a pointer here. If we look at the milk yield options, you can see that milk yield was reduced by 26% in the first year, 29% in the second and the third year of once a day milking. And, to be fair, they are pretty high levels of production that we're achieving. In terms of the milk solids yield, again, similar across years, 20 to 22% reduction. And again, our once a day herd are achieving about 400 kilos of solids across the entire lactation. So it is like a good level of production. You can see there the concentrate that was fed to the cows. It's like low to moderate concentrate. So again, good production levels achieved on that concentrate input. If we move on then and we just look at the role of early lactation once a day. So for this experiment, what we did was we put cows on once a day as soon as they calved. So for either 4, 6 or 8 weeks. And then once that time had elapsed, they returned back to twice a day milking. So for the first 4 weeks of lactation, we saw an immediate reduction in milk production and milk solids yield. So milk yield dropped by about 22% and milk solids yield by 20%. There was no difference in the fat, protein and lactose content of the milk. So the reduction was coming from a reduced milk volume. And just to give you an idea of what they were milking, the once a days are doing 17.4 kilos per day and 1.57 kilos of solids. The twice a days were milking 22.1 kilos per day and 1.96 kilos of solids. If we look then at the cumulative yields after the first 8 weeks of lactation, so for example, the once a day 4, so that's once a day milking for 4 weeks at the start, once a day 6 is for 6 weeks, and once a day 8 is for 8 weeks, and TAD is twice a day. You can see within that, like say, for example, the once a day 4, they have been milked once a day for 4 weeks and twice a day for another 4 weeks. So after 8 weeks, the twice a days had a higher milk yield and milk solids yield than all the once a day treatments. However, the once a day 8 were lower than all other treatments, which is as you would expect because they've been on once a day for the longest period, and we know that there is a reduction in production. In comparison to the twice a days, the once a days produced 24% less milk and 23% less solids just during that first 8 weeks of lactation. Now, the interesting part is when we look at 35 weeks of lactation, so basically across the full lactation, we can see that the twice a day and the once a day for 4 weeks had a similar milk yield and a similar milk solids yield across those 35 weeks. The once a day for 8 weeks had a 7% reduction in their milk solids yield just by milking, we'd say, once a day for the 8 weeks at the start of lactation. Now, although there are kind of differences between the treatment, it is important to note that this was an experiment that we completed. So all the cows were given the exact number of weeks once a day. In reality, if this was on a herd, say if you decided to do once a day milking in February, cows that calf at the start of February will be on once a day, for example, 4 weeks, whereas cows that calf towards the end of February, say the 25th of February, and you're changing back to twice a day on the 1st of March, they're only on once a day for a short number of days. So in actual fact, any losses at farm level are going to be minimised, and they will be quite minimal. Somatic cell score is always, a question, or somatic cell count is always an issue that we get asked about in terms of once a day milking. We did find an increased somatic cell score during the first 4 weeks of lactation, but then it settled back down again when the cows returned to twice a day milking, or even those that stayed on once a day milking for a longer period, that settled back down. And over the whole lactation, there was no effect on somatic cell score, which is quite positive. In terms of the body weight and body condition score, you'll remember me saying that this is one of the advantages of once a day milking. And you can clearly see here that this line, the lowest line on the graph here, is the twice a day cows. So throughout lactation, they tended to have lower body weight than the cows that were milked once a day for a number of weeks at the start of lactation. If we look at body condition score, it's often harder to find differences here, but if we look, we can see that there is a bit of an advantage in terms of condition score for cows that were milked once a day during the start, particularly for those that were milked for 8 weeks once a day at the start. Their second half of the lactation, they still had improved condition score compared to all the other treatments. So just to briefly summarise the early lactation once a day, what we found is that with once a day milking in early lactation, there is an initial 22 to 24% reduction in milk yield and a 20 to 23% reduction in milk solids yield. However, when the cows return to twice a day, they immediately increase their production and get back to the levels of the twice a day cows. And because the period is so short, it's not affecting total lactation production, especially with 4 weeks of once a day. 6 and 8 weeks, that can reduce milk and milk solids yield compared to twice a day. Over the whole lactation, there was no difference in somatic cell count. And I guess the real bonus here is that milking time is reduced by 30%. And that's just cups on time that's been reduced by 30%. So there's additional labour savings in terms of getting the cows washing and all that kind of thing. Sorry.
Before you go on to that, the next piece there, just there's a couple of people from New Zealand there suggesting that the cow type that we're using for the trials could be an influence in terms of the reduction. So there's a guy, Gray Baldwin, he's milking 850 cows once a day for the last 6 years, and he thinks that the reduction is associated with our breed that we're using. So they last 9%, but they're mostly Jersey, and he thinks black and whites can't handle it. So obviously we're using crossbred cows, or there's a combination of cows maybe on the trials. Are you seeing any differences with the cows in spite of EBIs and so forth? Obviously, are milkier cows more susceptible to greater losses, etc.?
Yeah, so, well, like, firstly, the herd that we have, there's about a third Jersey crossbred in it. When we've looked at, when we've analysed the differences in breed, we have found no differences. And yes, like, higher yielding cows are probably susceptible to a greater reduction in milk production. But I guess, you know, you also have to look at the bottom line, how much are you actually producing across the entire lactation, and is it worth your while? That if you do the maths on it, the financial loss can be quite great. So, you know, you have to take that into consideration too.
Okay.
Are there any other questions there, Stuart, or will I keep going?
No, you can keep going there. Yeah, thanks. Sorry.
Okay. No, perfect. So late lactation once a day then. So this is just milking cows for the last 11 weeks or the last 7 weeks of lactation on once a day. Prior to this, so from the start of the lactation, so once they calve, they were on twice a day, and then switched to once a day 11 weeks, which was from the 25th of September, or 7 weeks, so from the 23rd of October, they went on once a day until they were dried in mid-December. Again, the key to this is good grassland management. So the average pre-grazing yield that we offer the cows was 1,521 kilos dry matter per hectare, and their post-grazing height was 5 centimetres. So they weren't being pushed too hard, and they were being offered 2 kilos of concentrate per cow per day. So if we just break the end of lactation down into a few weeks, the first 4 weeks of once a day milking reduced milk yield by 19%, and that was for both, regardless of when you started, 11 weeks out or 7 weeks out. But one of the interesting things we found here was that if we look at the twice a day cows, from weeks 8 to 11, their milk production decreased by 12%, in line with the natural fall of the lactation curve. However, the cows that were on once a day milking, their milk production dropped by 25%, so over double that of the twice a day cows. So just to bear in mind, you will get a faster drop off in milk yield if you do drop to once a day milking. However, the relative production loss is less in late lactation compared with early lactation, as the milk volumes are considerably lower in late lactation, which again refers back to what you were talking about a second ago, Stuart. If we looked in terms of the milk solids yield in late lactation, the milk solids yield reduced by 11% in the first 4 weeks with once a day milking. And again, the magnitude of the reduction increased as the lactation progressed or reached the end, as milk solids yield was reduced by 20% from weeks 5 to 8 with the once a day milking compared to twice a day. I guess the biggest issue with late lactation once a day milking is somatic cell count. So what we found was that when you went to once a day milking in late lactation, there was an immediate increase in somatic cell count. So across the period of once a day milking, it was higher for cows that were milked once a day for 11 weeks, just because they were on it for longer. And on average, the somatic cell score was 12% higher with once a day milking in late lactation. So from this, what we deduced was that you need a cell count of less than 100,000 before you switch to once a day in late lactation. And again, that might mean that you have to dry off higher cell count cows before you switch to once a day milking. So just to summarise that late lactation once a day piece, good grassland management is critical, that we need to include grass in the diet for as long as possible and to reduce the number of milkings that we have indoors. Again, you need a low cell count and you need good management practice to try and retain it as low as possible, as there is an increase when you switch to once a day. It does reduce a little bit, but not back to the twice a day levels. Again, there is a labour saving with late lactation once a day, and it can help contribute to better work-life balance. You know, it can free up a little bit of time in the autumn there and get you well rested before the spring starts again.
So Emer, just in relation, if you just go back one slide there again, sorry.
Sorry.
Just in relation to the grass diet situation, what? No, we didn't have a problem with it this winter or this autumn just gone really, but like when weather conditions are tricky, what are you doing in terms of the management of the cows? They can't stay out maybe all the time, obviously. Like
No, so we will on off graze. We'll kind of go to paddocks maybe where there's lower covers. We'll give them 12-hour breaks, which I know means going back. Like if they're on once a day, it means going back a second time during the day. But that's what we were doing because we found that when, like, given that the drop in production is so great, you know, and that as you reach late lactation, kind of the magnitude of the drop is increasing. So if we put silage into the diet there, it's going to make it drop off even faster. I guess, you know, it is worse when you go for a longer period of once a day milking. So that 11-week one probably took the hit. So you know, if you're running out of grass or whatever, maybe a shorter period of once a day. So you know, you're reducing that loss in production.
okay, and just what's your opinion on, we'll say, early lactation once a day for a herd that's averaging 7,000 litres then?
Like you're probably going to get the 20, we'll say about a 25% reduction in milk yield, but they do bounce back straight away. Like we obviously within our herd, you know, there is quite a high proportion of heifers in it. So, you know, 23 to 27%, but equally, you know, there's very high yielding cows in that. And some of the cows on once a day, they were peaking at 40 kilos, which might be similar to a 7,000 kilo herd. And again, they bounced back, and over the full lactation, there was no big loss there. So I think personally, for a 4-week period or for a month, for 4 to 6 weeks, it's a no-brainer. I'd be incorporating it into the system.
And it was probably covered now, going back to the once, or I think you did say it there, but just it's come in as a question there. So this question is after jumping there on me. The time saving made by milking the first 4, 6 or 8 weeks of lactation, quantifying that, you're saying that it's just basically 30% reduction in labour, isn't it?
And that's just cups on time. So,
yeah, okay.
You know, it's like, yeah, we could add in a figure for like, you know, getting the cows in or that, but that's going to depend how far away your cows are. So for us,
and it's going to vary significantly from farm to farm depending on the layout. Like, but you're you can approximately assume that you're going to save 30% labour by doing it. Like,
yeah, like it's not a 50%, because obviously the cows are coming in, like their yield isn't reduced by 50%. So, you know, they have a higher yield when they come in the morning. So it is taking them longer to be milked in the morning when they are being milked.
Okay.
But you just don't have to start again in the afternoon.
Okay, so I'll let you go ahead there now, and with the last piece there, and then we'll come back to some of the questions again, maybe.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so this time this experiment just finished there in December, and this is looking at early and late lactation once a day. So just to recap, we had three weeks of once a day at the start of lactation. So cows calved, they were milked once a day for 3 weeks, back to twice a day, and then 9 weeks from the end of lactation, so October the 4th, they were put back on once a day. So we had 12 weeks or 84 days of once a day milking in total across the lactation. Sorry. So I guess the big question is, like, do you lose anything across the total lactation? So in terms of the total lactation milk yield, there was only a 5% reduction in milk yield, which was 304 kilos, so very small. The cows, when they went back on to twice a day again, similar with all the other experiments, they responded straight away, and peak milk yield was the exact same for the short term once a day and for the twice a day cows. So you can see 25.5 and 25.3. And again, average lactation length was the same, so 41 weeks for both treatments. In terms of total lactation milk solids yield, there was a 7% reduction in milk solids yield, so only 35 kilo reduction in milk solids yield. So for 84 days of once a day milking, you're only dropping 35 kilos of solids, which, you know, is pretty small. So if we just break that down then and look at it in terms of the milk and milk solids yield for the first 3 weeks of lactation, milk yield reduced by 16% in the first 3 weeks and milk solids yield reduced by 11%. And this graph shows exactly what I've been talking about, that we can see here, this line at the bottom, the green line at the bottom, is the cows that were being milked once a day for the entire lactation. The orange line on top is the twice a day cows, and this light green line is the short term once a day. And you can see from week 3, they have jumped straight back up to the level of the twice a day cows and have shadowed them during that mid lactation period. So there is an immediate recovery. If we look then at the milk yield and the milk solids yield for the last 9 weeks of lactation, when they went back onto once a day milking, what we can see is that again there's an immediate drop in production. So over the 9-week period, on average, it was a 27% drop in milk yield and a 23% drop in milk solids yield. There was no difference, no significant difference in the fat protein of the cows. So that reduction in solids was coming from a reduction in milk volume. And it was quite interesting to note that when we put the short-term once-a-day cows back onto once-a-day, their production dropped to the exact same as the cows that were on once-a-day all year. Again, the somatic cell count increased with late lactation once a day. So just to reiterate that we're suggesting you need a cell count less than 100,000 before you change over. And again, that you can possibly dry any high cell count cows before switching to once a day. So just to wrap everything up, good grassland management is essential. You know, getting your pre-grazing yields right at 1,400 to 1,600 kilos dry matter per hectare and grazing them out properly, so you've good quality grass coming in the subsequent rotation, and particularly in autumn to try and include grass in the diet for as long as possible. When you switch to once a day milking, there is an immediate reduction in the production. However, when they switch back to twice a day, particularly in early lactation, they do recover straight away. Somatic cell count is an issue in late lactation, you know, when you should be maybe taking out those high cell count cows before you switch over, and production levels do drop faster with once a day in late lactation. However, with all the short-term once a day work that we have done, there's very little effect on total lactation production with the short-term once a day, and there is a labour saving. So in summary, we believe that short-term once a day milking has a role on all farms this year.
Okay, very good. So Emer, just as well to clarify again, the time that we'll say, what time are the cows being milked here on the studies? There's just a question there. Is it the same time as morning milking, or is it been done in the middle of the day or something like that?
Yeah, no, it's morning milk. So they'll be milked at 7 o'clock in the morning. Like say, generally, if we were milking them twice a day, it's 7 and 4. So we just milk them at 7 if they're being milked once a day.
Yeah, okay. And obviously, like, it fits into the routine as well in terms of maintaining a kind of a level of a routine that if you are going to go in the middle of the day, it might throw the kind of the routine of the day off, like, which may actually have a negative impact, really. So that feeds into the next question I'm going to ask now. So, and I know you're planning on something for this year, but 3 and 2, any interest or research done on that so far?
So we haven't done and looking at the changing the milking intervals. This year, what we're planning to do is to look at 10 and 7, and probably 12 and 7.
Okay, very good.
So
that's going to start this year, hopefully, and we'll have some information, I suppose, preliminary results maybe this time next year coming from that as well.
Yeah.
So I just have to read through this one now. Is it fair to say that early lactation once a day is not going to have a sufficient carryover effect to have an effect on reducing peak lactation yields that will be required in some processors this year? What would your opinion be on reducing yield by approximately 15% for those peak months? So that's come up a couple of times in relation to the Glanbia situation, obviously. Any thoughts on it? I think Dan may have some thoughts on it, all right, in terms of, I suppose, maybe doing the 4-week once a day at the start of the year, going back twice a day, and then going back once a day, more or less, as cows are coming into peak. You haven't research done on it, obviously, but what's your thinking on it?
So as we haven't done research on it, like what we have seen is that if we do once a day for a short-term period in spring, so 3-4 weeks in the spring, peak is not affected. However, if we go to 8 weeks, you know, that is reducing your total lactation production. You are getting closer to to peak at that stage. So you probably will hit it a little bit. In terms of mid-lactation, we haven't done the work, but like again, you're probably going to get at least the 20-25% reduction in milk solids if you do go once a day milking in the middle of lactation. How they're going to respond after that, I don't know, because they, like, at that stage they've passed peak and they're on kind of like the downward slope. Yeah, so I'm not sure how they'll respond afterwards, if they'll come back up. I know if we were to put in late lactation, when we go once a day, the cows wouldn't really respond if we put them back on twice a day. They would a little bit, but they wouldn't get back to the levels of the twice a day cows because the yields are gone so low.
Yeah. Any health or fertility benefits identified across the groups? I suppose the group sizes aren't probably large.
Group sizes are small. The fertility has generally been pretty good anyway. So, you know, maybe 1 to 2 cows not going in calf. So it's there is with the full-time once a day, we are seeing like an increase in fertility. Like there's less cows empty at the end of the season. They also have a higher condition score at the end of lactation. They're about half a condition score higher, and they're about 70 kilos heavier in weight. Okay. Just have a quick look at the late lactation body weight and condition score. Like it is increasing, like once a day milking is increasing the condition score of the cows in late lactation.
And is there a certain level of management required with that then, Emer? Because we'll say, I know Dan is going to say it there, we'll say about the Jersey crosses being more prone to milk fever if they're going to be drying off in a greater body condition score as well. You're really going to have to actively manage their body condition, whereas I suppose milking twice a day would probably manage the body condition to a certain extent, maybe in the run into the dry period.
Yeah, so when we talk about a difference, like it's not like, I think the average was 3 versus 3.15. So, you know, they still have a bit of wiggle room there to put on a little bit of condition before calving. With the full-time once a day herd, yeah, you do have to kind of restrict them a little bit over the winter so they don't get completely mud fat.
Okay, I suppose this might be one more for Dan, but I suppose again we can put it to him in due course. Could once a day put the whole concept of selective dry cow therapy under pressure in terms of milk? We'll say cell count being a challenge and having to take out cows maybe early in order to maintain the cell count. Obviously, then they're obviously going to have to get treated. But is there a risk that if you do go once a day in a non-controlled manner, basically, that you're not going to be able to do selective, like?
Like I said, it's just preliminary analysis that we have done on that work. Some of the cows that are within that study have been the selective dry cow therapy using them. It's on a part of a different study, and there's antibiotic therapy used on others. So, you know, we can look into that in time. At the moment, I don't really have any results on it, so Donna's probably better placed to answer that one.
Okay, and then the final one that I'll put to second from last, I'll give you one more after that then. Have you looked at any financial aspect in relation to the once a day? I know Patrick has probably looked at it at previous conferences before, but just let's say, and Eamon is going to show us how he's performing in terms of his financial figures. But what's your perception in relation to that drop in yield that we're talking about, or drop in milk solids yield, how that impacts? Like my own take on it is, I know of several herds that are doing the once a day 4, we'll say at the start of the year, and they're still doing over 500 kgs in milk solids quite comfortably. So not a real hit there. And I think somebody said it already that it's not impacting in that scenario. But we'll say if a herd is going to go once a day full time, how much of a drop are they looking at, and what's the compensation in terms of reduced input that may come about from it as well? And as I said, maybe Eamon might be a better place to talk about it, I suppose, as a practitioner of the process, rather than in research terms. It can be difficult to take out the cost there.
So we haven't done any full economic analysis yet. I guess we were waiting to get to year 3 to see, you know, did they respond back to levels, the same production that they were on when they were on twice a day. In terms of the short term, just to deal with that first, you know, there is no difference in total lactation production, so there shouldn't be any reduction really in or too much reduction in revenue. We did, like, if you looked at it, like, there's numerical differences. So just, you know, very quick calculations that we did looking at, say, the early lactation and the late lactation once a day. like, yes, you are losing, you've lost 35 kilos of solids, so you are losing some revenue. However, you have to weigh it up, and the work-life balance that's the work-life balance that's there, what do you gain? And it's very hard to put a value on that if that's what you want, is more time. In terms of the, like, say, the full-time once a day, again, quick calculations that we have done, we found that given the drop in production, it will probably pay for, like, if you stayed twice a day milking, the loss that you have with the once a day will probably be enough to pay for a labour unit. So again, I guess it comes down to choice, and if you want to hire somebody, and how easy it is to do that. So yeah.
Yeah, okay. So the last question, I suppose, we kind of touched on it already, and I suppose just as a point of clarification before I say it to you, that for some of our overseas people that are tuning in, we are paid on kgs of fat and protein produced, as opposed to being paid by the litre, just in case there's any confusion in relation to that in Ireland as well. But just the cow type for once a day, does it matter? I suppose is how I'll put it, yeah.
No, we've spoken to Don about this and asked him, and he's pretty adamant that we don't need a separate once a day, like an index for a once a day cow, if you just use high EBI cows. And I think, if you look at the performance that we're getting, 400 kilos of solids with a once a day herd, that can't be argued with. That's pretty good.
Yeah.
So I think if you have a high EBI cow, that's sufficient.
And as I said, we'll come to Eamon in due course, but Eamon is doing in or around that in a commercial herd situation, and we'll be hoping to achieve more as well. So that's fairly good strike rate in terms of milk solids, considering I've seen once a day herds that are outstripping the some twice a day herds quite comfortably, like so, and I'm sure you have too, obviously, but there's a lot of things have to go the right way, but that's down to the management capacity of the manager as much as the herd of cows, really, isn't it?
Yeah. And again, the grass and management is kind of key to it. Like, if your grass is wrong,
yeah,
you have a very bad base. So if you get the grass right, you're half the way there.
Yeah, okay. Very good, Emer. Thanks very much. So Dan, I'll ask you to start sharing your slides. So you've one that kind of covers both bases, we'll say, in terms of twice a day cows, but once a day as well. But obviously, as Emer has alluded to there, the management of cell count in a once a day herd is going to be of higher level of significance than in a twice a day herd. So it's important that we can try and achieve this in a once a day herd in particular, but it's going to be relevant to people that are milking twice a day too. So
yeah, thanks Stuart, thanks James. You did right. Look, we're going to go through a few management issues, lads, just coming up to calving here in Ireland. That's starting now, and conscious as lads from outside Ireland listening in as well. Look, to achieve 100,000 once a day, it's a fair trick, even in twice a day herd. Not I might say once a day herd. And I think really it's in the context of what's coming down the road in the legislation. We touched on it there with the change in legislation here in Ireland, where prophylactic use of antibiotics is going to be outlawed. So you're looking at, we have to use them as selectively. So like selective drying off is going to be, and it's one of the things we have to look at, I suppose, going forward. Hey, look, Emer's outlined the positives and the once a day, and it's, look, the general health of the animals, you can see it, like, from a lameness and fertility point of view, it is a nice increase you'd see on farm level. And Ireland is probably no different to a lot of other economies. Labour, and every profession is struggling to get labour in the present economic environment, and the dairy industry is no different to anything else. And that's why you're looking at it from the point of view of once a day, and the milk composition and the cost base that you can get is but the big challenge that we see out there is just controlling somatic cell count and mastitis, and especially in the context of reduced use of antibiotics, which the industry is demanding and wanting, and society needs. So we really need to tackle this and try and mitigate against this. And these chronically infected cows inside in once a day herds are absolute disaster. So it's identifying them and removing them and mitigating and what trouble they do in a herd. We're here now in our scenario where we're on this, the risk period as well documented. You've all seen this graph, after drying them off, but that we're in the vulnerable stage now here in Ireland. We'll be starting calving now, I suppose, the 1st of February to the 10th of February. The lads will be starting away, maybe the end of January. So we're coming into the vulnerable stage, and that week, 10 days after calving, and like that's 20 years old work Green has done over in Britain. 60% of all early lactation mastitis was originating during the dry period. So you pay a lot of consequences in the spring time of the year for poor practices at the dry period, during dry period. So this next 3 weeks for us as dairy farmers is crucial to mitigate against the problems we're going to see next spring. So look, we'll just tease out those few over the next 10, 15 minutes and stuff. But look, what I see anyhow on the once a day here is the body condition score, while it's a very positive thing in the sense of holding body condition, I'm seeing here cows can get very overfat. The excess body condition and cows coming up to calving is a significant issue on farm herds. And it opens its gate then to metabolic disorders like your fatty livers, like your ketosis, and milk fever is a huge one, especially the Jersey grasses. And it's the gateway disease that's allowing mastitis and stuff to come in. So here in Ireland, we'd have a lot of high potassium silages, which mitigates, which definitely contributes to milk fevers, or magnesium input, and what we're going to use and stuff. But look, body conditions, or a lot of lads now will be vaccinating cows now at the moment with the rota corona for scour or IBR, whatever. It's a great opportunity to have a look through the cows and get an outside pair of eyes to have a look at them. Like when you're looking at a herd of cows the whole time, it might be no harm to get another pair of eyes just to have a look in, just to see are they on target, because it is one thing we do see on the once a day herds is just condition can be, especially if there's good silage made. There's a big variation in silage made here in Ireland over the last year because there's a tricky year, but certain herds, it's something that really needs to be monitored and addressed. I think now before calving, from a farmer point of view, we got to look back and see what kind of issues were there last year to see can we address them this year. And the big thing here is milk according. Anyone that's not milk according here in the conference, you just have, if you're serious about your business, you have to go milk according, especially in the context of what cows are selective in that, and to be part of it. But here in Ireland, we get what they call a cell check report sheet where ICBF look at the analysis and they analyze the data and they say, right, how did my dry cow period do? How was the mastitis control over the dry period? So in this herd, you can see he dried off 161 cows, or she under 200,000, and 13 of them calved down higher, which is 8%, and our target is 10. 4 out of his 34 heifers calved down higher, over 200,000. But his issue here was his cure rate over dry periods was poor. It only cured 5 out of 15 cows, and it should be 85% cure rate. There's only 33% cure rate. Now, the obvious thing you could say is there a resistance to antibiotic? But in this case, it wasn't. When you looked at the 10 cows, it wasn't cured. They were chronic cows that should get the road anyway. And these are the things that you need to look at. Going back and looking at these cows that are repeat offenders over 1 or 2 lactations, and just take him out of the herd. Like if we look at this is the type of format that the report looks at, and you look here, you need to do your first milk according within 60 days. In my opinion, once a day herds should be doing their first milk according within 30, 40 days of the cows calving. At the rate you're calving cows, and you need to find out early the high cows to mitigate against the issues they're doing to the rest of the herd. I think you should be lining up your milk according for the first week of March within 30, 40 days of calving. I think 60 is too late for once a day herds. It may be okay for twice a day herds, but especially for once a day herds, I think it's important. And you can see in this herd last year dried him off. That's his percentage herd. 100% of the herd were under 200,000 at drying off last year. And this is the distribution. No, this year it's spring out. Like his dry cow just fell apart on him, so he infected uninfected cows, heifers got infected, 41% of the heifers calved down high, and his cure rate was very poor. But, so you need to look back and identify where are the potential weaknesses in my model and address them. And one thing that's a weakness on dairy farmers here in Ireland is we're not recording our clinical cases of mastitis. And if we text them into that number, if we record them in our herd watch apps or Munster apps or whatever apps you're on, they will transfer across into ICBF, and they'll show us a graphic like this. Red, if they're red, that means they're under 30 days of calving. If the mastitis happened in cows greater than 30 days calving, they show us a grey bar in that scenario. So if I see a sample and they're all red, I know it's a dry cow problem. If they're all grey, I know it's more than likely a lactating cow, contagious type issue. So you can get a lot of data from the analysis that we have. So look, one thing on the breeding, and we'll just get on, and there's some lads highlighted about Jersey crosses and so forth in EBI. One thing I noticed from looking, and we've looked at a lot of herds in the back end of the year. When you look at high cell count cows and you click into their EBI, they're very poor on the health sub-index. They're either negative or low positives. You have to be picking bulls at high positives. I'd say +10. And there is a very strong correlation between it. It's a real strong metric from the point of view of selecting that genetic ability that can stave off somatic cell count. It's something we need to be. I've really seen it in the last year, and where we've been picking out maybe about 100 herds and selective drying off and going high levels. And when we look at the high cows, the EBI is really showing their health weakness in that when they're high cell counts. And of course, you're looking at the type traits and teat length and speed of milking and so forth. Look at calving. We're getting ready now for calving here. We're looking at calving boxes. They're probably disinfected, cleaned out. Have I heifers sealed or not sealed? It's too late to go probably seal them at stage now with an internal teat sealer, but there's external teat sealers. They're available. They've come onto the market. How good are they? We don't know. There is work coming in from New Zealand about teat spraying heifers starting 3 weeks before calving, and showing very good results with that, especially you're training them to the milking parlor. And then you're looking at your pre-calving minerals, especially addressing that magnesium allocation from the point of view of milk fever and stuff, and just looking at those type of issues and stocking rates within your calving boxes and so forth, to minimize the infection that's coming through. The internal teat sealer that you're using in your cows is a huge, I suppose, it's a huge help in mitigating against to mitigate against infection at calving. There's no doubt about it. People get away with murder with the internal teat seal coming up to calving. It really comes into its own that 3 weeks coming up to calving and after that. But look, here, look, our cows are housed here. I suppose 95, 98, 99% of them over the winter time due to climate and weather and all this. And like, look, you must have them dry, clean and dry, and like, you need good environment inside her. And look, as we've increased our herd number since quota has, our stocking rate within our housing is a huge issue. And when I go into a shed, it's something I like to see inside in the herd, is just when you go into the house, okay, this is not the cleanest, but it's dry, but all the cows are standing with all fours up the cubicles. They're getting rest from the concrete up in the rubber, and it just shows the cows are comfortable. It's mitigating against stress. Okay, there should be a lot better liming and stuff in these cubicles, but it's, as a design of a cubicle, it's very good. And like, this is something that you have to be very careful of. And we see this quite a bit out at farm level. Old mats curling, pooling at the end of the cubicles, insufficient fall. Like, whatever you say about those cubicles, there's no leaking on those cubicles. You know, and we get outbreaks of strep mastitis, staph mastitis with these type of cubicles, with early calved cows leaking on cubicles, poor milk letdown, and then leaking then when they're coming out here. And that's an issue for us here and during the housing period, and particularly in the spring for E. coli and strep uberis type mastitis. Now, some people on the once a day to mitigate against things like that, and is like, especially people part-time, that milk in the evening so that the cows are lying down with slack bags. Don't milk in the morning, which is the traditional way most of us would do, and have the day free for us. But during that housing period, some people would milk in the evening, 3, 4 o'clock, so that the cows, if they have to be housed at night and they be out by day, or else they're swapping, they're out by night and in by day, you know, depending on farm circumstances. Look, locking cows off cubicles for 30 minutes after milking is a big help. And there's a number of companies having restraining barriers that you can fold on quickly just to keep cows off cubicles, so I can use that slatted area as my collection yard after milking before I let them off, or if I'm not in a position that they can go off. But it is a big help in mitigating. I think we are going to be pushing these a lot more from an advisory point of view. They're working, and they're working very, very well. These lock-off barriers, look, ropes and straps and stuff, they're grand, but they're too tedious, fellas. Cows, we get up underneath them. There's the fold-away barriers, you know, they're quick, they fall down, they'll fall back out of the way, and there's something I think we should really be looking at as farmers. Look, from a milking parlour point of view, my own personal opinion is you should be starting with new set of liners. If you shut down completely, which majority of you probably have what you're listening here, you start with a new set of liners. I have sliced open a couple of these liners that I've carried over from one year to the other and swabbed them, and you'll get Staph aureus colonies coming through when you'll swab them on the agar plates. So start with a new set of liners from a disease point of view, but from a milking efficiency point of view, and just check. Be surprised. Just check the little indicators. This is the same whether in New Zealand or whether you're in Ireland or England, wherever, or Britain. These little indicators, amazing how many you'll get the odd one of them wrong. And if you get one of them twisted and you get a quarter not milky out right in early lactation, has a significant impact on the clinical mastitis that's coming there. So just have a quick scoot along when you're just be conscious, if you're doing the changing yourself, be conscious of that. Or if you've help, just make sure that everyone is aware of that. And if there's technicians that do it, just give it double check yourself just to make sure there's nothing like that. We're recommending 2,000 milkings to change and that is as crucial with once a day. I'd be pulling it on the lower side than the upside with once a day milking. You have a higher volume of milk. They're on the cows that little bit longer. It's something I would not skimp on in once a day herds is changing of liners. Very, very, very important. And the reason why we're saying that is as liners get older, what happens is the cluster will creep up the teat canal, and what it does is it actually restricts the flow of the teat sinus. Here, it closes that off, so it restricts. So it causes this under milking. So there's less milk leaving during the milking phase, and it's resulting then because of lower collapse pressure. So you're longer milking, and you're leading to over milking, which is leading to hyperkeratosis. And we'll tease that out a little bit more now. Like when I finish milking and the cluster comes off the cow, within a minute of the cluster coming off, the teat opening should be no greater than 2 millimeters wide. And that's very, very important. That's something, one thing I've got clients look at when you're drying off. The only time that all the teats are looked at is when you're drying them off. And I said to clients, whatever you do, teats go to cows now as you're drying them off. And the amount of fellas that came back to me said, Jesus, Dan, I was very surprised at the amount of damage that was in cows' teats, the level of hyperkeratosis that's there. And something we're not aware of as farmers enough. And the way our parlor is set up, because this is Mother Nature's way of stopping the infection getting in. So that's a narrow boreen, that's like a 4-lane highway. And like that's no matter what we're going to put in artificially to mitigate against that, you're not going to do the same as what Mother Nature will be. So it is up to us to mind it. And look, what you're trying to do is that keratin, mind that keratin plug, you know, Mother Nature's, yeah, it's the sticky wicket, as they say, catch you, you know, and that's what you're trying to mind. You're trying to let Mother Nature do its housekeeping. You know?
And just before you go on there,
yeah.
There's a question in there from Brendan Healy in relation to the silicone liners, and it came up there before on a webinar that we did before as well. The lifespan of them, like they're obviously not infinite, but they're longer than the normal rubber ones. Like, is there a risk even with the fact that they're rubber side, that their rubber staying good, but is there a risk with carryover of infection in that thing? As you're saying that you're swabbing staph colonies out of the old liners, like?
The honest answer, Stuart, I don't know, because I haven't tried it. That's a good one. The second thing I would say is that from a lifespan, they do have a lot longer lifespan. The third thing I would say is when you're starting, what I'm getting fellas with silicone liners to do is to do a peracetic acid wash in the milking parlor through it as a disinfectant in the plant. We're gone to chlorine free here in Ireland, to caustic and caustic only and D scale. But peracetic acid now is our disinfectant. So in those silicone types, it's very important that peracetic acid is used in the final rinse. And Dave Gleason's work, Dave Gleason there in Moore Park has shown that we've excellent kills with that and used in the final rinse. So that's what. So if I have silicone liners and I'm running through, let's say from year to year, so I'm not going to start with a new one. What I would be doing in that scenario, I'd be doing my hot wash. I'd be doing it once a week, coming while I'm dry, and I would be using peracetic acid in the final rinse.
Okay.
And let that sit in the plant.
Okay. And another good question then from Seamus Killorn, would once a day before drying off help teats to heal?
It does help it. Yeah, it does help it. But it helps it, but it can increase the level of infection then, because I'm harvesting. You see, if I have a staph infection inside my herd and I go once a day tail into lactation, that's why the cell count's going up, because I'm harvesting every 24 hours instead of 12. So now the level of infection is very high. But he is right, it will heal coming up to drying off. But I would not be using that scenario to help heal the teats, because they will heal during the dry period anyway.
Yeah.
So I think it's too, if I had a cell count issue, or if I was on, I wouldn't be going once a day to help the teat condition. I'd stay on twice a day to keep the level of infection down. I would dry them off for longer to give them a chance to heal. Again, when they get damaged, just like pulling a hamstring. It's easier to pull it the next time you go out for a match. You know, so you'll see it the older cows, but what you're trying to really guard is the first and second calvers, you know, and the future genetic potential of your herd.
And the other thing, Dan, I suppose, is it can that hyperkeratosis be coming around because of not actually changing the liners maybe there in July, August, and that you wouldn't have as much teat damage if you did do the change of the liners? And even if it is coming to, like, just depending on cow numbers and so forth, they're looking at the the equation that you showed there, you know, you can have variation in when you need to change. Like you could see some parlours that could have to do 3 liner changes because they're milking a lot of cows through. Even if that liner change is coming close to the end of lactation, they should probably still do it. Like
they should, because of the risk. It's risk mitigation, and it's risk when you're on once a day. The lads' cost base now would be very good, very solid, like, and a very good output. But like, you know, where you really make hay is towards the tail end of lactation. Like, that's the bills are paid for. This is my money, like, towards the end of it. And like, when I'm losing output and getting penalized with cell count and stuff, and losing output, subclinical output, let's say, from a relatively low cost input like liners, it's something you definitely shouldn't be skimping at. There's no way you should be putting your business at risk for that level of an investment, whatever they're really tailing, I suppose, like €30 a piece set or something like that.
Yeah.
You know, but it shouldn't be. It shouldn't be, because number one, to get the proper milk out and mitigate against any staph. Number two, stop this hyperkeratosis coming. It's a contributing factor to it. There's other issues, and I'll deal with them now that are contributing to it. You know.
Yeah. Okay.
But
just one question, continuing on the same vein there again. Just is the once a day 2,000 milkings as well, or is it double the time span?
Right. Say that now again. You're saying.
Well, I suppose how you figure it out. It's still 2,000 milkings, isn't it?
Oh yes, it's still 2,000. Oh, sorry. Yeah, I know what you're getting at.
Yeah.
Is it still 2,000 milkings? Yeah, you're still working on the 2,000 milkings.
But your number of days is going to be different there, because your milking frequency is going to be different in the equation, isn't it?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And like, and my point about that is, let's say, you know, the obvious answer to that is, look, 3 months on twice a day, 6 months on once a day. You know, so it's there for 6 months. I'm just picking figures off the top of my head, just simple maths, like, you know. Yeah. But I'd be keeping that closer to the 5 than going from 6 to 7. You know what I mean? Yeah. I'd be on the once a day, because it is there long and longer. There's chemicals being used. You're probably hot washing every day. You know, you add all those factors into it. That'd be my opinion on it. You know.
Okay, and just the last one on it then is are you saying not to risk once a day at the end of lactation because of the risk of the staph infection establishing? I don't think you're probably saying that. I think you're probably saying from the meetings that we did there before Christmas together, that you're more talking about dealing with the problem cows before you go take that step once a day, like exactly like Emer has said, that you get your cell count in order before you take that step to go once a day, like. Exactly.
And then this is where, like, you use what data you have your milk recording done, you know, geez, there's a low level of infection inside in the herd. If there's a couple of high cell count ones, you deal with them, whether it's drying off a quarter, drying off the cow, and you get that level, you get that risk out of the business, and then you go your once a day, no problem. But if you're sailing away around 250, and there's a nice spread, 20-30% of the herders are on the wrong side of 200, in my opinion, you can't really look at once a day at that scenario. You're going to put your business at too much risk.
Yeah.
You know, it's all down to, like, the lads that go once a day towards tail end of lactation, you're benefiting from how the thing has gone. Like Emer highlighted there, under the 100,000. She's bang on. That's what we would see out at farm level as well. You know.
Okay, so drive on there again. So
okay, job. Look, what are causing these teat and damage? Look, it's like, look, the working vacuum. You know, these are simple housekeeping issues, but amazing, they're still causing the issue. Like the operating vacuum of the milking parlor should be around 46. To end up with a teat and vacuum around 43. This is working at 52, 53, so you can see where you're in trouble. You know, the regulators, just check. I know these are extreme pictures, but look, this is just to highlight the point. You know, that these should be checked. There should be a spare set of them that you take them off once a month, wash them in a bit of warm water and very liquid, hang them up inside the compressor, and just making sure the regulator, because that's running the whole show. The air bleeds, just check them. There's real basic stuff, but the amount of places they're wrong, just checking the air bleeds. It's allowing the cluster remover to work right. It's allowing the vacuum to stay stable. When the cluster remover is taken off, it's not pulling it off under vacuum. And this is very common here in Ireland. I don't know, is it common in New Zealand and Britain, but the cluster remover settings are set too tight. Between when the vacuum is shut off to when the remover engages, it can be 0.8 to 1 second. That should be up to 3 seconds. And it should be like, and that is very, very important, because it's trauma over time. And like, and the easy way to do it is if you plug 3 units and put your thumb into the 4th one and hit start and just let it let it on, and then just hit stop and count from the time you feel the vacuum to when the string engages, and you won't be that far out. It'll give you a good indication of what it is. And it's a major, even Spanu powers, it's a big issue. It's something we really need to keep an eye out on farm level.
So
Just
that's
checking
pulling off down as well, like, so
yeah,
very much cluster hitting the rump rail nearly being pulled off. That's you're looking for it still to drop off nearly, and that the rope just sweeps it, like. And the other thing we'll say for the air bleed, I think you've said it there before as well, is especially with cluster removers in parlours, people aren't always taking the cluster off the cow. But just watching for clusters that milk falls out of them when they get pulled off, that's a sign that the air bleed is blocked, isn't it?
Yeah.
And like they get blocked on a day-to-day basis. Like I know what Tom Ryan used to always say about checking those on a daily basis.
It is, and what's highlighted to us more than anything is the people that install the cluster flush system. They're being quick cleaned every milking, and and they've noticed that cows have become a lot more comfortable, a lot easier. They're not kicking as the cluster is being coming off. They're not engaging that way aggressively in it, because every time the cluster remover is cleaned out, when that's being whipped out, like when it's with the cluster cleanse system. That's only a side. That's not what you're putting in for, but it's a comment that would come back at farm level.
Yeah.
You're just checking the alignment, that you have equal weight distribution, that you're sitting nice and square on the 4 animals. But look, I would say, look, and quick synopsis, you set with your new set of liners, your operating vacuum at 46, pulsation ratio 65, 35, 68, 32. The ACR is at 3 seconds. And like, just and making sure watching for slow milkers. Any of you that have a cluster flush system in place, don't just assume that you have it, that it's working. I've got caught with this. You need to just check and make sure it's flushing between 800 mils and a litre per flush. Because I've gone into units, and when we've actually calibrated. So what I'm talking about is, you start your cluster with your bucket, you hit stop, it flushes into the bucket, and you pour it into a graduating jug, and you see there 800 mils to a litre in that flush. I've gone to a number of units where there's been only 100 to 200 mils going through it, and they haven't been getting the kill. So you've paid the investment for it, but it hasn't been doing the business. So, and you should be doing that check every 6 months. I would be hot washing the parlor once a week now before you start, just to make sure you don't get any fights with TBCs and Tamarjurics coming up to.
Or a minimum, maybe do 2 hot washes in the run into starting to supply again, like.
Yeah.
And bulk tank as well, obviously.
Big time. Yeah. Big time.
Okay.
And look, milking routine, I think, look, just a comment, couple of things we see out there at farm level and from work that's been done is, look, pre-spraying, and as Emer highlighted, like you're going to be checking all the cows as they calve to make sure there's no problems with them, make sure they're milking out and stimulating milk letdown. But by doing that, you can be a vector for spreadiate. So pre-spraying mitigates against you from spreadiate, plus it stimulates milk letdown, plus you're killing any environmental bugs that's in the teat opening in particular, and it has the potential to reduce it by 95% when it's done right. But you must dry wipe it. You must wipe it off to get the kill this there. And staph is a crucial thing with under milking. Staph aureus is our biggest fight. Now we have to fight with strep bubris is getting more of an issue, but staph is a huge issue from the point of view of that. Whether you segregate them with the bigger herds, they'll be segregating. They'll have problem cows in one group. In the smaller herds, that we'd have a good few of them here in Ireland, they might be cluster dipping, they might cluster flush, but cure rates can be very poor. And early identification of these cows and culling them is a crucial issue. Look, cluster dipping is tried by, after problem cows, they'll dip them. But look, if it's not done right, it'll do more harm than good. You're putting into peracetic acid solution. If I'm a mastitis cow or a high soil count cow, you'll dip the cluster in that one just to stop her from spreading, or else she's keeping last. But one thing, what we would come across is where, and watch for this one, where people milk the problem herd last. And if you have a poor wash regime, the infection then is very strong inside in the liners, and it actually contaminates the good group in the next milking. Be very careful of that. No harm to do maybe a swab of the liners every so often, especially the bigger herds that are inclined to do that. So they'll keep it maybe to 2 rows, or on a rotary, they'll keep it to 1 rota, 60 on a bale or whatever it is. And if the wash regime isn't properly, that contamination is there for the next group, good herd that's coming through the next time. And you'd often see fellas that are complaining about problems, and if they've segregated their herd, just watch for that. CMT kit and gloves, just get into the habit of use it. If there's heifers with high in 3 to 4 quarters, don't be worried about it. It's stress induced and they'll sort themselves out. But it's a good management tool just to keep an eye on things that's going on at farm level. Look, teat dipping, it's a big issue on rotaries, especially is the proper application of teat tips onto it. Like, 15 mils per pound per milking right here, but you can see most of this is on the other than on the teat itself. So it's just getting good application of teat tips. And Dave Gleason and Sarah will just do a little bit of work, and Sarah Fitzpatrick have basically what they did was they looked at all the teat tips that are on the market, and they on agar plates. So they had little pipettes that they were dosed in. So they basically plated out the Staph aureus, Strep uberis, and E. coli on agar plates, and they put down their little tabs of teat tip on it, and they looked at the kill. And basically, they found that high concentrations of chlorhexidine and lactic acid was most effective against Staph aureus. Now they've got very good feedback with hydrogen peroxide and lactic acid as well, and they're looking into that as well. But I think for once a day milking herds, the barrier dipping at the start, I think is a very big help to them. If you can, you're going to have more time because of the longer milking in the parlor itself, and if that time is there and if you used it constructively, I think post dipping with a barrier dip is something that you should really consider for the first month, 6-8 weeks in the calving period. It's a big help to help prevent this mastitis. And from Dave's work is, you're looking at about 6,000 parts per million of chlorhexidine as an iodine-based one, or as chlorhexidine-based ones. But like, this is the biggest thing. The organic matter is a huge, like, it causes a 2% to 71% decrease in efficacy. So like any people that are thinking of pre-spraying or cleaning, so if you're pre-spraying and you're cleaning a teat and you're applying a teat tip to this to clean teats, it's a huge, the organic matter has a huge impact on how these work, and Dave's work has really showed that out, So, it keeps coming back to hygiene and doing it right and its impact on it. And the data is the work that David and Sarah has done has really brought that home to us. So look, on the once a day herd, the bacterial challenge in the herd is a big thing. I'm harvesting the milk every 24 hours. So if I miss a cow, she has so that's going to impact on my cure rates. So if I miss cows, so if I miss them this morning, that means it's tomorrow morning by the time I get them. Early identification is crucial with this. I think the use of oxytocin is something that should be considered at farm level, just that milk letdown hormone to really get 3 cc's into the muscle, just to get the cow, talk to your vet on it, to get the cow to flush out that infection as much as possible. And the use of an anti-inflammatory, these non-steroidals, is a huge help as well to help improve the cure rate. And you're conscious of the fact that it's every 24 hours I'm going to see that cow. So I don't have the opportunity to harvest the infection out like I do in a twice-a-day herd. So it's just something to be very, very careful.
So Dan, just expand on the oxytocin piece there again now, because it's important that people are clear on what you're getting at there with that, please.
I suppose basically what I'm talking about is cow comes in this morning. She has a clinical case of mastitis. I've identified her. So what I do is I give 3 cc's of oxytocin into the muscle before I apply the cluster. You go away and you prep the other ones about a minute or two, and you come back and you put the cluster on that cow into the dump bucket, and you milk away that cow. So the oxytocin, because there might be an inflammation there, is helping to push the infection and eliminate as much of the milk out of the quarter as possible. And you see this yourselves. If you milk the cow standardly and you milk her, you take the cluster off and you go to strip that cow again, you'll get a lot of mastitis coming out then, or mastitis milk coming out afterwards. This is to help empty out the quarter as much as possible, get the infection rate down as much as possible. You'd only use it the once. You wouldn't use it for any more milkings after that.
And you'd be giving your anti-inflammatory then as well, obviously, which is going to help.
Anti-inflammatory then, when you're finished milking, you'll draft her out, or do it there in the milking if you have the time. You give her your tube, your anti-inflammatory, and whatever systemic antibiotic your vet is recommending, or whatever your sensitivity is saying.
What you'd be saying, Dan, because I know from the twice-a-day stuff, you're hitting them hard, but you really have to hit them hard in the once-a-day scenario because of the lack of flush, basically.
Yeah, I think the lack of flush, and I think we're underestimating the pain associated with mastitis. The anti-inflammatory is a huge help in farming. Talk to your vet on it. These non-steroidal, these, there's the pain associated, it's an inflammatory response, you know.
Yeah.
It's like, you know, and that pain management, it allows your tube or whatever preparation you use to penetrate better, and you'll get better cure rates, and you know.
Okay.
So
right, so you're just saying in relation to the duration of milking, then you're just talking about milking time there, is it?
Yeah,
okay.
yeah, just the milking time, like you just you know, just be conscious of it, you know, just, you know, it's going to take that little bit longer, but you know, whether the helper's there or not, it depends on the setup. It's just to use that time constructively, like, and I think the focus should be on harvesting milk and mitigating against any issues rather than maybe other jobs, like, you know, some people will tail paint and so forth like that during the milking process, and that's fine. I have no issue with all that, but it's just be careful that it's not, you're in a milking parlor to milk cows. Every time you leave that milking parlor, you're spending money, you're making money when you're inside it, and prioritize it inside there, you know. So it's just something I would see from doing calls and stuff out there. It's just you know, remember what is the focus, what's the priority, you know,
rather than multitasking. So
yeah,
focus on the task in hand.
Yeah, and it can be something once a day herds can slip into.
Okay. Just on the pulsation there, Dan, you mentioned it earlier. You're saying what's the right what's the most appropriate, and is it different for twice a day versus once a day then maybe?
Yeah, no, the same settings will go for both. We'd look for, say, a 65-35 ratio, or 68-32 would be used quite common here as well. But the biggest thing, and the rest phase, when the liner closes in around the teat or around your tongue, when you put your tongue in, is what they call the D phase. That's the rest phase. And that's so you want that at about 20% of the cycle. So it should be 200 milliseconds or 20% minimum. That'll vary from 200 up to 25% of the cycle. That's what you're looking for. So when I have a 65-35 ratio, 25% of that 35 will be, and the rest 10 will be where it's closing, let's say, you know. It's getting a bit technical now, but
okay,
that's your guide, like, but it's just help to make it's easier on the cows. Cows like it. It's very gentle on them, you know.
Okay.
Because when you go up closer to the milking scenarios of 70-30, it speeds up milking, but it's very hard on cows' teeth. You see a lot of teeth and damage with it.
And sure, I think you've said it before, and it's a good example of it. Just stick your thumb into it and at 70-30 compared to 65-35, and you'll feel the pressure. It'll be purple after you take it out.
Yeah. Heifers really suffer in the early start when there's no edema and stuff, and the other and stuff. They really suffer, you know, after calving. So it's something just to keep an eye on it.
Yeah, very good. So. I think we've answered a lot of the questions as we've been going along, and we can take a few more as we proceed. But we'll switch over to Eamon there, who's been sitting quietly in the background there, and we'll go through his presentation. So I'll just get it going here now first. So as James said, Eamon is farming near Crockwell in Loughrea in County Galway, and I suppose we're just going to talk through this as opposed to doing an actual presentation, I suppose, with you, Eamon. So I suppose in one sense, to just give a bit of background on the herd, we're talking about you were a liquid milk supplier back in 2007, and it was at that stage that you kind of went down the crossbreeding route. So you are now fully crossbred herd, and I suppose there's been a lot of talk about the type of cow in this scenario, but you were saying yesterday when we were talking that you actually felt that you had an ideal cow for crossbreeding because you had the yield obviously from the liquid milk type cow, and you're getting the boost in terms of the solids from the crossbred. So you were milking twice a day, and I suppose you grew the herd from 110 cows up to 160, would say, as quotas were removed and so forth in 2015. And then I think you won't forget the beast from the east anyway, because you were saying yesterday about the day before you got notification that you were losing 57 acres or 22 hectares basically, and only 6 weeks notice on it as well. So it was by accident almost that you came to think of once a day nearly, in a way, really, wasn't it?
Well, it sort of came on me fairly fast, but it was something that had crossed my mind previous to that. When I went to in 2017, when I went to 160 cows and I was milking the full 74 hectares, the farthest land away was being used as support block, really. And it had crossed my mind that I would once a day and milk more cows. Would I be making more use of that land? But then in 2018, when I got the short notice about losing the lease land that was so close to the parlor, I was sort of stuck in a hard place. And I found it, I had two options. I could have sold 40 or 50 cows and gone on just kept going on twice a day and just use about the 35 hectares closest to the parlor, because the farthest away wouldn't be practical walking them twice a day.
Yeah,
it's 2.5 kilometers to the farthest part of the farm, and that was one option. And the other option then was to go once a day and try and keep as many cows as I could.
Yeah, and I suppose you didn't go into it blind though either, because you'd actually happened to attend the once a day conference in January of 2018. It was like a stroke of luck, I suppose, maybe, that you jumped into the Jeep and went down with your friend that was actually genuinely interested in it at the time. Like,
absolutely, and I remember being very interested on the day, but in hindsight, it did cost me for that. When the once a day option was looking at me, I had heard at that conference that 15 to 20% of the cows may not suit once a day, and I was afraid. I sort of knew 160 cows was too many to go for on once a day. It would have been a stocking rate of about 3, I think. I thought it was going to be difficult, but I thought that if I sold 20 cows, I could end up selling around 20 cows and end up with cows that the system didn't suit. That was one of the reasons I kept all the cows. And I had hoped that I'd be able to, in 2018, I'd be able to source winter feed and things off farm. But as it turned out, 2018 was the year of the drought, and that was a costly mistake. I struggled to feed all the animals that year and get them winter feed.
So you were stocked high at the time. Anyway, I suppose, even on the twice a day situation, and I suppose just to make it clear to people as well that you lost this land, the Beast from the East, was the start of March. You were more or less out of that in the end of March, and I think was it the 25th of March you said was the first night that you didn't bring the cows in for milking. So they were in a twice a day scenario really, and then you kind of switched them to the once a day just at the end of March, because as you said, your hands were tied really.
My hands were tied, yeah. It was the 25th of March, I remember. They were a good bit away from the house, but a neighbour of mine rang me at around 11 o'clock that night, and he said, Eamon, there's something wrong with the cows. They're doing awful shouting and roaring over here. And I was sort of embarrassed to tell him that I didn't milk them in the evening. That's why they're roaring. But they did that for 2 nights and got out of it, and after that they never looked back.
Yeah, I've often heard people saying that. Yeah, it's the farmer is the harder person to change rather than the cows. Yeah, I've heard that several times. So yeah, I suppose, look, we'll show a map now in a second, and you've already mentioned that it's 2.5 kilometers to the furthest paddock, and some people might think, what about it, like, but there's actually 3 or 4 road crossings involved in it as well. So it's a challenging farm in that sense, I suppose. You're now milking 140, you've come back from the 160. Did you find it easy to identify the 20 to cull that time after the drought, or?
Well, as it turned out, I didn't find many cows, not too many cows that the system didn't suit. During the drought that time, I ended up selling cows just at the beginning of the drought, because I knew I was going to struggle too much to try and feed them. Okay. I ended up giving them away at bad prices, and but it was a situation we were in. Everybody was suffering that year. There was just no feed growing.
Yeah. Okay.
But I haven't found. There's a small number of cows I know that go dry in August. They'll milk away fine, and then come August they'll start putting flesh on their back and dry up, nearly overnight.
Yeah.
but there's only a small few of them.
Okay, yeah. And I suppose, are you doing anything? You have a very high EBI, Frisian Jersey Cross herd at 161 of an EBI. Are you doing anything in terms of breeding, in terms of selecting kind of genetics that you feel might be more suitable to the once a day?
I don't think I'm doing a whole lot different really. I when I'm selecting cows or bulls, I'd look at the percentages, fat and protein, and I'd also look at the kilos of milk.
Yeah.
Because it's only my 140 cows. I'd be looking at the ones, if they're very negative on kilos of milk, they will seem to be the ones that go dry. There's a chance of going dry.
Yeah, makes sense, I suppose.
So I like to keep them close to zero.
Yeah, you like the potential. You want milking potential, but you're not going after much huge volumes either at the same time. Yeah. Okay, so you're contract rearing heifers now, and you were doing that as well just before you went once a day as well.
Yeah, I've been doing that now for I'd say 7 or 8 years. But it's an arrangement with my brother. The brother
Yes.
has a farm, and he leased it. He wasn't able to stock it back, I'd say, about 2012 or 13 of that, and it's just it's a good system. He takes the heifers off me, the calves after they're weaned, and he keeps them until puts them in calf for me, and they come back for the winter before the calf down.
Yeah, and that's allowed you to farm the whole block then with the whole, and it's been an influential piece as well in terms of the whole once a day as well now that you are able to go to the whole farm now, because they're only doing it once in the day, but it wasn't really feasible to do that twice a day because of the road crossings and the actual distance as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that 2.5 kilometers, if they've gone over to that field, they have to cross 3 roads, and you can't drive them and wait for them at the same time, because you have to stand at the road. They're not roads you can throw a wire across to drive the cows. You have to, cars, traffic comes, you close the gate and let the car off.
Yeah.
So you have to. I spend an awful lot of my time standing on the road watching the cows walking past me.
You were saying yesterday that you nearly have to take a lunchbox with you when you're going to those faraway ones.
Absolutely, yeah.
The other thing that was that's interesting, I suppose, is your infrastructure. So you have a 14-unit parlor, 140 cubicles and adequate storage and so forth. And we were saying yesterday about we'll say in terms of obviously that's 10 rounds of cows. It's in your game plan, I suppose, that you're going to do something around the milking parlor, because a bit like Dan said, their cows are milking longer when they're on once a day, and you would like to be able to kind of put them through a bit quicker if you could.
Yeah, well, a row of cows now, you're doing very well to get them out in 15 minutes. Sorry, at peak. It's a long time standing there waiting.
Yeah.
So 10 rows of cows is 2.5 hours at peak, and you can't. When I was on twice a day, you could speed up milking the days you were in a hurry and you wanted to get out fast. But you can't speed up the once a day. You just have to wait there with them.
Yeah. I think the point that you were making in that sense was that some people might consider once a day from the point of view of not having to go and invest in facilities in a milking parlor and so forth. It's not something that you think is like, you might do it initially, but ultimately you think that decision can't be kicked down the road forever. Like,
absolutely no. It's you need the facility there. If you're making a big number of rows, once a day is not. If you're milking 15 rows of cows now, once a day is going to kill you.
Yeah.
Because that milking time in the morning is huge.
It's going to extend.
But you couldn't have too many units, I think, for the once a day.
Yeah. Okay. So we'll just move on, I suppose, just to give people context around the farm that you're farming. Then obviously, so where the circle is just after appearing there is your farmyard. If people can see it, they'll see the public roads identified here, and where the mouse is moving there on the right hand side is the area that was actually beside you that you lost, which was less than 100 yards. That you said, I think some of the closest land was nearly 100 yards, only 100 yards away from you.
It was
but you can see,
the right hand side of the farm there. Yeah.
Yeah. So people, just I suppose, as I said, to put it in context, this is the land that's 2.5 kilometers away. And as you said, you're crossing a road here, and a road here to get to it.
Mm.
And as you said it as well, it's not a case of letting them off, and that let's say some people may have ways and means of crossing some kind of by roads, maybe that people can still pass with traffic and they know cows are coming, but that wasn't an option for you. So
yeah,
the reality of it was, so Eamon, you were really actually only using the vast majority of the time the land around the parlor and the land across the road from the first at the first crossing, and the rest
correct.
of the land then was kind of your support block as such. So you were stocked heavily enough on the land that you were using as platform, say, even though all of it could be classified as platform.
Yeah. And if I was to, when I lost that land to the right of me, was I would only have been able to stock up to that point there where the second road crossing.
Yeah.
That's what I would have called my milking platform then.
Just because it was just too tricky from the point of view of going across here and having to come back across this road and then come on to cross this road again.
Yeah, well, I know I'd have if I stayed on the twice a day, I'd end up pushing it too hard, and I'd end up depending, at the shoulders. I'd come under a huge amount of pressure, and the cows that have to walk on long distances, or I'd end up zero grazing, and all that kind of thing would come into it.
Yeah.
It's just too far away twice a day.
Okay, so, and I suppose just to move on to how your performance is, like James has said, you've actually very good performance both financially and from a physical point of view. And Emer was talking about the 400 kilos that they're doing on the research herds here in Moore Park. You're doing 410 there in last year, in 2021, and like comparing that to what you were doing, you're kind of in or around the 450 kgs on a twice a day herd scenario. And obviously 2018, then you saw the drop. How did you find that? We'll say, as I said, your hand was forced. You kind of made a decision, obviously. I won't say you were forced into going once a day. You made a decision to go once a day. How did you find that first year transition from having a twice a day scenario where you were doing 450 to having dropped back to the 375 in 2018 then?
Well, I had lost basically a third of my farm, so I had accepted there had to be a reduction in income. But the fact that I was at the Horse and Jockey that previous January, and they were talking about the 80% production, you'll drop 20%. That sort of kept me going every time I'd look and be comparing with my discussion group. I was always within that 80%. You know what I mean? So yeah. I was quite happy.
Felt you were doing a good job.
Yeah, and that I hadn't dropped more than what would have been expected. I also had kept all the cows at that stage. So so I had lost a third of my farm. I had only about 20% of my production lost.
Yes,
I was quite happy.
Yeah, very good. I suppose a key point to emphasize here is that you, like in your twice a day scenario, in 2017 you were at nearly 380 protein and 450 fat. Like, so you have a very good basis to build from for the once a day. So you have the potential to do the higher solids. I suppose what I'll ask you is, you've obviously progressed there once you fell into the routine of once a day, I suppose, and the cows maybe adapting to it as well. You've been increasing year on year. You feel that there's more in your cows in terms of a once a day solids yield. You have very little culling done in the last number of years in relation to production ability and so forth. So, but you think that it's quite achievable for you to get back to where you were with that once a day herd now?
Well, I do, yeah. I have set that sort of target for myself to hope to get back to 450 kilos in, I don't know what kind of a time frame I've given myself, 3 or 4 years maybe. But to date, I haven't done much culling. Even the cows that go dry in August for me, they're still there. I wouldn't sell, if a cow is not producing, you're not going to sell her as a milking cow to somebody else.
Yeah.
So
okay.
she'll stay here with me until she naturally weans off. She won't be bred for for replacements. But until she naturally goes, she'll be on the farm. And I have, if that, we'll say that bottom 15% that are there in that scenario, if they're gone, it's going to improve my production. But it's going to be slow. It's not going to be a drastic change. I'm a believer in small steps and slow and steady progress.
Yeah, very good. And I suppose the other thing, like fertility performance was good in the first place, and is nearly on a par basically. You would think that should be better nearly.
Sorry?
Your fertility performance has been good all along, but I think you were saying yesterday as well that you think it has the scope to be better again.
Well, that 87 when I started, that was the year I put in. There was an extra 40 efforts put in that year, so that's what made that one look so good.
Yeah.
But I suppose on the first year there, that the Kevin interval there is 378 was 78.
Mm-hmm.
The following year is down to 364. That I nearly put that one down to the huge amount of meal that was going in during the breeding, the drought. I might be wrong, whether it affected or not, but I had a serious hit on the first year in fertility.
Okay.
Improvement hit. I
yes,
think.
Yes, yeah.
It's sort of been steady since, really. I would hope I'd be a bit improved this year again. I'd be hoping to hit 90, if not this year, hopefully next year.
Okay.
I had a bad year this year now with dodgy straws at tail end, so that's leaving me with a fairly high empty rate this year, and maybe that might improve matters for me going forward too, because we better stock coming in.
Okay, very good. Just then picking up on Dan's piece that he was covering there, the cell count element of it, and again, this comes back to your, I suppose, lactic culling will describe it as in the short term. Your cell count, you're managing it, but you've probably feel that it might be beginning to move in a direction that you're not going to be overly happy with.
Absolutely. This year now, I did a program with my vet on selective dry cow therapy, and at the end of it, I was advised it's not an option for me. This because I had too many at the tail end, but they crept up too high. There in November, December, I went up. My average probably went up over 300.
Okay.
Definitely in November, and there was new infections happening all the time. So I think I'm at a critical point where it could balloon out of control if I don't take serious action now. And I'm very interested in Don's presentation. There's a lot of it I'd have to implement.
Very
but
good.
it's at 178. I consider it fairly good. It's at the point where it could run away on me.
Yeah. So, and would you have found it hard to keep that in that order, Eamon, or is it okay, as you said, right up until the end when you just get that, I suppose, a lack of dilution, maybe housing coming into the equation as well?
Yeah, no, all through the year, it's not been an issue. I've been under the. I've never gone over the 200 until November, anyways, I would say. But it's just there's obviously a few problem cases in that herd that I need to identify and get rid of. Basically, I 2019, the first year of the pandemic, I didn't do any milk recording, and that was probably a mistake.
Yeah.
This year, and then last year, I milk recorded. So I'm waiting until maybe the first recording this year now, where I'll probably take action at that stage. Cows that haven't cured.
Okay, very good. So we'll just move on to the financial piece. This is something that several people have been asking questions there during the course of today so far. So we can see that your twice-a-day performance is shown there on the left, and it's highlighted in red. And then your 2020 performance is highlighted, and your group average then as well is in there. I suppose it's important to point out that you are 100% cow farm, we'll say. So from a per hectare point of view, you're all dairy hectares really. So people that are rearing their own heifers or have outblocks and so forth, it can dilute that. But so just to be clear for people that your performance relative to your group average is how will you say, slightly inflated maybe in that regard. But your performance is very good at the same time, like, and we can see that, okay, as you said, you accepted that there was a financial hit going to come when you went once a day and you knew that it was coming at you, but you're still delivering quite a high level of output. Costs were something that you've been very focused on ever before the whole issue around the land been taken away. So do you think that was an important element of it? That you were focused on that cost, that you were very cost conscious, and I suppose maybe explain to people what do you do to keep on top of costs, or what's your way of operating that you make sure that your costs don't balloon, basically?
Jimmy, I don't know. I suppose that comes down to a discussion group. My own group that I'm a member of for a good number of years, we'd always go through figures with the profit managers, and I suppose it's compared and being open. And you know, if I was spending money, this is going back 10 or 15 years, if I was spending too much money on any one particular part of the business and I was out of kilter with the rest of the group, I'd have to find out why and try and rectify it. And I suppose it's from years of that, really, not being left behind, trying to be as good as the next guy, I suppose.
Challenging yourself.
Exactly, yeah.
And then
I was going to say, I don't see myself doing anything special at all as regards cost control. Only if I don't have to spend it, I don't spend. That's it.
Yeah, that was an interesting thing in our conversation yesterday, that you put a lot of thought. Well, I suppose I don't want to make it sound like it's a cumbersome thing, like, but you think once, you think twice, you maybe think three times, do you really need to spend money on particular things? But that's not to say that you don't have good facilities. You still have good facilities, but you mightn't spend big on doing those facilities, or you try to find a kind of a leaner way maybe of doing them from a financial point of view.
Well, yeah. But simple is often best, I find, and I don't know, an awful lot of systems get complicated with zero grazers, and I don't know, I'm not knocking zero grazers, but there's an awful lot of people complicate their systems for no particular reason, but and they end up spending more money as a result. Whereas if you keep it very simple and, you know, get the cows to grass, harvest the grass, harvest the milk, that's all you have to do, really, to it's the most profitable way.
Yeah, so I suppose the overall comment in terms of the financial side of things from your perspective, we'll say, so you obviously, and I should point out here, I forgot to mention it, that 4,300 per hectare in 2017 is on the basis of the 76 hectares that you were farming there, whereas 2018 is on the basis of the 54 hectares that you're farming, and that's been the hectares that are involved here so far, heretofore. So just like financially, so I suppose, can you just give me a very brief description of where you feel the business has gone from the point of view of finances? So you had a good performing herd, you were very good financially because of a good cost base, but you had good performance to go with it as a twice a day herd. How have you, how would you marry, like, people are asking the question there, putting the value on the labor, putting the value on the time, maybe, you know, are you down money relative to where you were a couple of years ago? And like, is it a concern?
I'm not. I haven't got the exact figure. I don't feel I'm down. I'm no worse off than I was when I was on twice a day financially. I suppose when I was on twice a day, I had more labor in the system. I had someone milking for me most evenings. When I took all that away and I lost, it was that lease which I'm not paying. When I take away all that, my bottom line hasn't really changed hugely.
Yeah.
I'm not worried about finances. Luckily enough, touch wood, I'm low borrowings. I'm not hugely over borrowed, so
But at the same time, we'll say there's probably a bit of money. Tom Murphy, your advisor, was saying there yesterday that there's a bit of money to be borrowed, maybe to extend the parlour that you're talking about doing. Like, you're not afraid to borrow money because you have the capacity to repay it anyway. It's just that at this moment in time, you don't have a high level of borrowings to
and I bought a bit of land in 2019, joining just to the left of the Milton platform that's there. It just came online into the system second half of last year. I'm building cabin facilities at the moment. It was meant to be done, but it won't be finished for the 1st of February now. But no, it's a cash positive business that I'm running at the minute.
Yeah, okay, very good.
There is surplus money there.
Yeah, so I suppose just to focus on a couple of elements that people are asking questions on there. Your level of meal feeding now versus what you were doing in the past?
Not a huge difference. Maybe I might be saving 100 kilos of meal per cow, but I find that the once a day cow, well, I believe that has to be fed the same as the twice a day cow. If she's not fed, she's not going to produce.
Yeah.
Especially at the tail end of the year, you have to keep feeding her well to keep her producing.
Keep her going, yeah, okay.
Yeah, she'll give up. She'll give up quick. The goes quicker than twice a day cow.
Yeah, which Emer's figures would have shown there that they're dropping off quite dramatically. So the other thing then is in relation to the cows that you had, obviously. So you had the crossbred herd that you'd gone crossbreeding in 2007.
Yeah.
But you had, were you milk recording? You said, you said you dropped the milk recording because of the pandemic only. So before, when you were twice a day, what kind of herd average were you talking about there? Some people are asking, like, we'll say, just from these high yielding cows, it's kind of been a trend of the whole conversation today. How did they adapt to going to the once a day from at a commercial level, we'll say, on your farm?
What was I producing before I went on once a day?
Yeah, what was your herd average? Like, obviously, like, herd average, if it's 5.5 or 6,000, that means that there's cows quite easily doing 7 and higher 1,000 litres. Like, so those cows are the cows that you've transitioned to once a day, and I suppose the question is, have they transitioned okay to the once a day?
Yes, the real high yielding cow that I have, and you'd see her when she calves down. Now, you could have a cow there that she's over 35 kilos of milk. You know, when she's hitting peak.
Yeah.
But she doesn't carry that. She doesn't keep it long.
Yeah. Okay.
You know, she just not have to carry that amount of milk, and she could go from 35 to 25 in a month. But they'll stay at that. I don't find them a problem.
Yeah. Okay.
Not a problem. They're not problems. The ideal cow would be the high percentage that would peak at about 25 litres and stay going.
It's persistence rather than a big peak, like. Yeah. Okay. And then I suppose just a final point, I suppose, to make is that the people are just asking about the labour and so forth in there, like that net margin figure there, be it per cow or per hectare, is what you take out of the business to cover your management ability, we'll say, cover your borrowings, pay your tax, make any repayments or whatever. It is accounting for any labour that you've hired onto the farm, but it's not accounting for your own labour. And look, that is just the way it is, because we can't, like, Eamon, you could have different hours worked to some of the other people in your discussion group, and if you go putting in your own labour into it, it confuses it. Yeah. So that's what you have to live with, basically, and cover the family expenses.
I have to say now, you're talking about labour and pandemic for the last 2 years. I have two sons here that would have helped out the last 2 springs now because of the pandemic.
Yeah.
Do you know that they were at home? If this year could be different, I might have to go looking for a bit more labour now this year. You know, so that figure there is paying all family labour. We'll put it that way.
Oh yes, okay, yeah, fair enough. So just to summarise it, I suppose, like, while your hand was forced, I suppose I wouldn't like people to get the perception that you fell into once a day either. Like you did a bit of thinking. Now, you didn't have a lot of time to think about it because, as I said, you only got 5 or 6 weeks notice of the last of the land. But you made the business decision, and I think it should be clear from the way you spoke about it that you had the alternative, you had the option of either sell 40 or 50 cows and concentrated on those. That area, we'll say, just at the one side of the road, basically, that you'd only the one road crossing to deal with, or you go down the route once a day, continue to milk the cows, and obviously be able to overcome the obstacles of the road from that point of view by virtue of the fact that you wouldn't have to be crossing them as much. Go on, yeah, sorry.
I said the utilising of that land, the fairway land, is probably the best land I have. And
right.
if I went on the twice a day, that land would be used for a low margin enterprise, be it dry cows or producing silage or dry stock. You know, so I felt the twice or the once a day really uses that land and makes it high value enterprises on it.
And your figures show that, like your financial figures show that.
Yeah.
It emphasizes that was it was a very, like, you're making full use of it all because you can produce high return material from it by virtue of selling milk off of it rather than selling anything else. Yeah.
Or cutting winter feed off it, or it's just.
Yeah. And just on it's a question that just came in there as well in relation to your silage situation. Are you cutting silage off of some of your block, obviously?
All the feed is coming off there, maybe a small percentage, but it's coming off all that platform.
Okay, and you were saying with the acquisition of the new land now, you'll be hoping that you'll be completely self-sufficient with that extra land. And the other thing that I suppose is important to point out as well is that you actually don't have any intention of changing your cow numbers because of getting that extra bit of land. You're actually seeing it as a kind of an insurance piece for your farm that you'll be able to.
Well, yeah, and with the new regulations and environment and all that, and nitrogen usage and all that, we have to try and make it more sustainable, I suppose. And it's another part of what I find about the whole thing. When I was stocked at 3.3 cows to the hectare back in 2017, I always had to have the grass. I had to be 100% there around the pair. I had to get out with my fertilizer in time. I had to be pushing, and I was under pressure at the shoulders. Things got complicated always, and I find when I'm using the whole platform, it's stocked at 2.4 now. It just makes, there's no pressure on. You go through a bad patch where the grass doesn't grow start growing until May properly. You have the whole area available to you.
Yeah, very good.
And it makes life so much easier.
Yeah, super. So I suppose just to highlight the points that you were making to us in relation to going once a day, you're using 11.9 ton of grass, I think, which means you're growing around 14 ton, which ties in with that stocking rate that you just mentioned there as well. But they're the key drivers. They haven't changed because you went from twice a day to once a day. Your drivers are still the same. So you have high level of grass utilised, possibly even more now from what you're saying there, because you're not under as much pressure on an ongoing basis. There's probably more grass getting into cows. Excellent cow performance by virtue of great genetics and obviously higher grass utilization or good grass utilization. And then what underpinned the whole lot of it, both in a twice a day scenario and even more so in the once a day, is very good cost control. And that's underpinning your performance as a whole.
Right.
And then I suppose the lifestyle benefits. Oh, sorry, you were going to say something there. Sorry.
Oh no, I was going to agree. It's all about turning grass into milk. It's our cheapest feed and best feed, and get the cows out to graze it. That goes across the board for once a day or twice a day.
Yeah, very good. I suppose you play a bit of golf as well, so the lifestyle benefits of going once a day were advantageous from that point of view.
Well, I don't know. Do I play golf?
Would you go to golf course?
Golf. I go to the golf course, all right, and I go to we're hurling country here. I go to all the hurling matches. Lifestyle. It's totally different.
And I suppose
Even in milking, most dairy farmers spend their day planning. Their day revolves around the evening milking. Everything has to be done to suit the evening milking. But when that went, it just changed life completely. You just so much time. If you want to go doing a job, you can go off at 4 o'clock and spend 4 hours mowing grass or shaking manure or whatever. Which you could, if I was milking in the evening, I'd be under pressure. I couldn't go at it, or So it's just freed up so much time.
And equally then, I suppose if you choose not to do those, you're actually free. You don't have to go milk cows. So there is, I think the key thing was that you were saying a lot of people look at it as a labour saving element, but it was actually more of a time saver, you thought, rather than a labour saver.
Well, yeah, time. There's only 7 days in the week, and there's only 24 hours in the day, and dairy farmers are the best in the world for filling them up with work. And the once a day has just taken out a huge amount of that. You'd manage all the labour of it, but the time that you spent in the milking parlour is call it a waste, really. It's time you can spend elsewhere.
Yeah, okay, very good. So look, I suppose we'll wrap it up with that. I suppose, James, do you want to come back in there if I think you've managed to stay with us the whole way through anyway.
Yeah, thanks a million, Stuart. Look at we've run over in time, guys. But what I might ask Stuart is each of the speakers maybe just maybe a one-liner in terms of a take-home message from their piece as a wrap-up. And I want to thank, I suppose, everybody that has tuned in. The recording will be available, and there'll also be a Dairy Edge podcast in terms of the key learnings from the conference, and that'll be broadcast over the coming days. So maybe just Stuart from each speaker, maybe a one-liner in terms of their key take-home message.
Yeah, so we'll go in order as we went. So we'll start with you, Emer.
For me, I think it's clear that short-term Wednesday milking has a role on most farms across the country, and I think it's something to strongly consider for the coming spring to try reduce the workload.
Okay, Dan, I suppose taking what Emer's just said there from a cell count management point of view for people going down that route, what are the key things that we need to be considering over the next month to 2 months now, we'll say? Can't hear you for some reason, Dan.
That's right. That's good trick. I think, look, the early identification of these problem codes and take them out of the system. They're crucial in the context of what we're going to be dealing with from the antibiotics and the treatment point of view. And not alone that, identify why they were caused in the first place. Why are they there? You won't cull your way out of the problem. It's a part of the tool, but you must find out the why and get, but milk a card and milk a card early.
Okay, and that's true of twice a day herds as much as once a day, but more important probably in the once a day because of that lack of flush, as we will describe it, basically. Yeah. And finally, last word to you then, Eamon, in terms of your take on once a day going into your 4th, 5th year of it now.
I suppose if I had 100 acres at the back of my parlour, and I had the choice between once or twice a day. On twice a day, I'm sure I could make more money, but on once a day, I'd probably have a better life.
Yeah.
That's any good, though?
Yeah, no, that sums it up pretty well, and exactly what you were saying, kind of along the lines of all the comments that you were making yesterday in relation to that. There's no doubt that there's potential for extra revenue there by going twice a day. But whether it's worth it or not to people, that's for people to make that decision themselves. So look, James, do you want to have the final word, or will we wrap it up with that?
Look, I want to thank our 3 speakers. I think we've had 3 excellent presentations. We've had a lot of questions come in, some of which we didn't get to ask, but we'll endeavour to get answers back to people over the coming days. So I just want to say thank you to our 3 speakers, and also thanks to yourself, Stuart, for facilitating, and finally thanks to all the viewers. We'd over 300 viewers on today. So there's obviously a very keen interest in once a day, both full term and short term. So thanks a million, and we'll leave it at that.
Okay, thanks very much, everybody. All the best for the season ahead, and we'll talk to you again. Thank you.